Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at the first submission by Erin of her horse, Rumour. Rumour is a 4-year-old thoroughbred off the racetrack that she's reschooling. It just says the horse can be a little short-strided, and she's working on that, which we see here. Starting off with the walk, we can see how she's a little bit tense through the neck, how she wants to pull that neck back. And once again, if you watch, that was a good example there to see how the position of the head and neck affects the movement of the back and the hind legs. Once again, she seems rather like she's pulling her pole kind of high and her neck back. And you can see how every time she does that, how the hind legs kind of stop moving. So once again, we're looking for that place where the horse will stretch into the contact, and we see that big swing out of the hind legs. But as you say, it still looks a little stiff there. But Erin says she works her in the walk for a while, and that tends to help the trot work. She gets looser. Not bad starting off here, though, in the trot. Once again, still a little tight, and once again, you can see how when she pulls that head up, how short the neck is. So we need to get this horse to stretch down much deeper, and then she'll begin to swing through a little better. But that's looking better already there. So what I would like to see you do once you get to that place there is just to send the horse on a little more. Maybe you need to work a little closer to the horse. That might help you a little bit, which means you have to walk a little faster. But we can see how with this horse coming around this corner here, we can see how it's kind of like a corner, and that's not what we want. We want a continuous arc on our circle. So you can see how the horse kind of pulled its shoulders to the outside. So that's one of the main things that we're always trying to do when we lunge horses, to get both ends of the horse on the same circle. Very often the horse, to avoid having to engage its hind legs, will pull its shoulders way to the outside, so the horse is actually on two different circles. That is, the front and back end are making two different circles. So it's very important. See her coming around there, same kind of thing, how she's pulled her shoulders way to the outside and the hindquarters are to the inside. Now the other thing about that, when a horse is doing that, essentially when we're lunging, now this horse doesn't do that to the extreme, but many will, and the thing is that they're really trying to point their hindquarters at you in order to enable them to be able to kick, and that's one of the things that just getting horses to yield its hindquarters away from us is a big step in training. That is that they, they give up their loaded gun, so to speak. Because that's what they're doing whenever they're, just as they do with themselves. If you ever see horses out in pasture, when one walks up or comes up to the other one, if the one doesn't want to be bothered, they swing their hindquarters at them and basically say, don't come at me or I'm going to double barrel you. Well, they do the same thing to people as well. And unfortunately, people once in a while, if they're not aware of that, can end up getting kicked. So that's not what we want to see. So once again, the importance of just moving those hindquarters away from you. Walk here is getting better after that little bit of trot work. Still not great, but still kind of slow. But you're certainly on the right track. She's having moments where she's getting to a good place. But once again, you can see how she kind of pulls that neck back and up, which tends to lock up the back end, and why we see such a stilted sort of movement in both the front and the back when she does that. This might be a good horse just because of the way it is tending to really pull its neck back into its body. The Shambone might be a good choice for this horse if you find that you don't get the horse stretching enough just using the side reins here before too long. This walk is improving a little bit. Once again, you can see how the neck is pulled up and back, and so we see that underside of the neck rather ewe-necked for a moment there, which tells us that the horse is, you can almost see it. In fact, you can see it if you look closely. When the horse pulls its neck back there, you'll see how it kind of stabs the front leg and pulls itself along with its shoulders. But as she stretches down, you'll see how the back end swings deeper into the body. So still a little too slow here. So once again, I would suggest working a little closer to the horse. You always want it to be, or if not always, at least until a horse respects the whip, we have to be close enough to that occasionally we have to tap the horse with the whip. Of course, I tell people all this all the time about practicing with the whip. It's very important that you practice with your lunge whip, and be sure that you're working with a lunge whip that isn't too heavy for you. I know a lot of the woven nylon ones, if they become wet, become very, very heavy if they soak up a little water out of your ring, and can become very difficult for ladies, for instance, to be able to handle, in which case they do make lunge lines that have more of a string kind of thing, as the lash, rather than a woven nylon, which tends to absorb a lot of water if you're in a wet place. So just be sure that you're working with a lunge whip that you feel comfortable with and that you can handle in both hands. And once again, I tell people this all the time: if you want to learn to lunge, the real trick is learning to be able to tap the horse with the whip when you need it and where you need to need it. So I highly recommend, if you're just getting started in this, to go out in your backyard somewhere away from horses, where it's safe and where you can practice with the whip against a tree, and like with a target, so you practice putting it at the same place. Remember, the places that we want to touch the horse are in that fleshy area of the buttocks above the hocks. Once in a while we touch a horse right where our leg goes to move them out a little bit. And then if a horse spins on us, we can touch, if you're very good, you can touch a horse on a shoulder to get it going back the other way. But that shouldn't be attempted unless you're very good with the whip. I'm talking about when the horse flips around on you. So once again, I'd just like to see you speed up this a little bit, work a little closer to the horse. Same thing here, we're seeing the shoulders are still pulled outside the hindquarters. Watch as the horse comes around there. See, the shoulders are way outside the line that the hindquarters are on. So we need to feel the rein a little more, get a little more behind the horse, walk yourself a little faster, get behind the horse so you can send the horse on a little more. Once again, same thing happening here. The horse is just kind of pulling outside the shoulders, and you're just not doing enough about it. And of course, what that would be to get a little, shorten your line a little bit, get a little closer to the horse, and you'll have to take a bigger step yourself. So this, to me, just doesn't look like you're asking for very much, so the horse isn't giving you very much. So we do have to ask for a little more sometimes. And we can see here how, once again, the neck is pulling backwards. That is, the neck is coming up, and we can see the underside of the neck. So once again, if you just took a little more contact, got a little closer, and pushed those hindquarters away, I think you'd start to see a little more activity in the horse. That's kind of the same thing there. And once again, you can also see how the rhythm isn't very regular, coming up and down. And that being the cornerstone of correct dressage, we're always looking for the horse to be rhythmic. Just a little more active than you are there. So the biggest takeaway here is that you just need to be a little more active yourself, get closer to the horse, keep the slack out of the line, and just try to encourage the horse to move a little more actively. And once again, if the horse breaks into a trot, that's no big deal. You just ask the horse to come down. Once again, by bringing the horse on a small circle. We never want to jerk on the reins unless it's on the lunge line, rather, unless that's an emergency situation. In other words, like with a horse that's trying to pull you across the arena. And sometimes that will happen when you work in a big open arena like you're doing here. But I don't see that. There's your friendly cat coming back to join us again. That cat looks like a big help out there. Obviously, he's not afraid of horses. Now that walk's starting to look a little better there. Now it's getting better by virtue of the fact the horse is continuing to work here, but I think you could influence this much more and get to where you're getting here a little bit quicker, once again, by just shortening the line, walking with the horse a little more, getting a little more behind the eye and sending the horse on a little more. But this walk is starting to improve, even though you're not asking for as much as you could. It's certainly getting better than it was. Once again, see how the horse is pulling the shoulders to the outside. It's almost looking to the outside, and you're just not doing enough about it. Once again, look how much better the horse looks then. It starts to stretch that neck down. It loses that shortened feeling. This horse has about a foot of neck that you haven't even begun to get out yet. That's going to come longer. That's looking better there. But as I said, I think the big thing here is that you could just do a lot more about this by just getting behind the horse a little more and sending it on a little more actively. That's looking a lot better there. Once again, look how much better the horse looks. See how it drops down there? All of a sudden the hind leg starts to move a little better. Now we can see with this horse that it's not fully working over its back, because we can see how the hind legs just kind of, they almost look like they're stuck in mud, as I like to say. They kind of get pulled up with this sort of stiffness. So this horse tells me it's still pulling with its shoulders a lot, rather than really using its hindquarters for much of its locomotion activity. Once again, still looking to the outside here as it comes around here. So this is just you being a little more on it here. As I said, just working closer to the horse, getting behind the eye. Once again, trying to push the hindquarters away from you a little bit. Now what that does, of course, is like a shoulder in. Brings the horse into position. In fact, you can even do shoulder in on the lunge line by pushing the hindquarters on around even a little further than just in line. And when we do that, the horse has to step deeper into the body and push its back up. Now that's looking a little better, and the step's a little longer. It's just still a little slow. But having said that, I certainly would always rather that you take your time in doing what you're doing, and if it takes a little longer, that's fine, rather than upset the horse trying to make it too active, as some people do, or to hold it in a frame. Problem with holding horses in the frame, it's never the right one if you hold them there, because they're always going to be tense against your hand, which means they're going to be tense across their backs, which means you're never going to get what you really want, which is for the horse to be supple and relaxed. Once it comes around the corner there, watch once again as the horse lowers its head and neck. Watch how the step improves. So basically the same thing here. I just feel like you could do more to influence what's happening here by just working closer to the horse. I mean, you're being very nice and patient here, but I think there's more that you can ask for. Of course, I'd always rather that you err on the side of caution and patience than try to get something too quickly. Better stretch there. And once again, you can just see as soon as the horse stretches down how much better the hind leg starts to move. But that's where, as he does that, I'd like to see you closer. I just don't see you asking for enough. So you could be sending this horse on a little more actively. But even the way you're going about it here, it is improving as it's going. But just a little, it could improve a little more. Or quite a bit more, that's what I'd like to say. So same thing here, the walk is just too slow and you're just not doing enough about it. Though you are working a little closer to the horse now in this direction. But you just kind of need to get more energy in yourself there, and make your step a little more actively, and just try to impart that sense of more urgency in wanting to move there a little bit to the horse. It's obviously a fearless cat that you have there. Well, that walk is starting to get a little more active. It's looking a little better. And I like how in this direction you are getting a little closer to the horse than you were on the other side. And once again, don't be afraid of the horse breaking into a trot. If it does, that's no big deal, because we want to try to push this horse, up to the level that it probably will try to trot a few times, in which case you just ask it to slow down again and bring it back to the walk. This certainly looks like a nice horse, though. I'm very happy to see so many people beginning to work thoroughbreds again, because I think they're wonderful horses, and unfortunately so many of them these days, because so many trainers have gotten afraid of them or have grown up riding these kind of horses that you can get away with kind of forcing into frames and things like that. It's very hard to get away with that with a thoroughbred horse, because you put them in too much confinement and they tend to explode and get very dangerous. So I applaud you for having one, a thoroughbred that is, and doing something with it. So many of them, they're such nice horses, and when I grew up, those were the horses that we used for everything, you know, in terms of hunters and jumpers. Once in a while you see a nice quarter horse or something that would be big enough to use, but you know, it was mostly thoroughbreds that we used. They used to have, you know, a second life. They go to the track, and then people would come back, like where I worked in Unionville. I trained horses for the track for them, for the family I worked for, and then they would come back and I'd retrain them to be hunting horses. And that's what everybody in that area did. So thoroughbreds had a second life with people who knew how to handle them. But unfortunately, once the warm bloods have come along and trainers have gotten used to being able to, you know, beat up these horses and put them in draw reins and all the things they do to try to force them into a frame, they can get away with that with a very dull horse. But you try to do that with a thoroughbred, and it's going to go out of its mind. And once again, why thoroughbreds got such a bad rap about, you know, the crazy horse off the track. Well, you know, actually, I've been to a lot of tracks and worked with a lot of horses that race, and you know, if you know how to handle them, it's one thing. But you know, somebody who doesn't know how to handle a hot thoroughbred takes it home, and now they've got a horse that they have no clue what to do with, and they're probably afraid of. And before long, they have it doing all kinds of disastrous things, and they're having all kinds of problems and getting hurt with them because they just don't understand how their minds operate. So remember, thoroughbreds are kept very, you know, they've kept that bred into them, that desire of flight, you know, which is what makes them race on the track so fast and why they don't want to be last, right? They want to be first, because in a horse's mind, when it's running in a pack, whoever's at the back of the pack is the one that gets eaten by the dinosaur, right? So thus their desire to be the head, the leader, and be in the front of the pack. But once again, that can be the difficult part of training them, because they have that instinct of flight. So we have to overcome that with kindness and with time and patience, so they trust. So that's the whole thing with a thoroughbred. If it doesn't trust you, you're never going to get anything out of it. You know, a warm blood, if it doesn't trust you, may, in many cases, just kind of internalize and check out what they do, because they kind of, you know, they'll take that way of training where they're just being abused a lot and just kind of internalize it and become kind of withdrawn, whereas thoroughbreds just go crazy and become very dangerous. Now this walk is looking much better now. Now it's starting to free up a little more. See, it's becoming a little more regular. And as I said, while I still think you could encourage this to happen a lot sooner than you're doing here by getting close to the horse and sending it forward, but I would rather that you take your time and do what you're doing here than to do the opposite of overpressurizing the horse. There's a lot with thoroughbreds. I mean, the hotter the horse is, the more time it needs to settle in, you know, and the more trust is necessary. Because as I said, when a thoroughbred doesn't trust you, it's going to try to kill you, whether it means to or not. But you know, when they get so frightened that they, you know, I literally have seen horses jump in front of cars with people. I've seen them jump off of cliffs with people. I've seen many of them flip over on top of people and this kind of things. It's because they get so frightened. If you try to hold them, then a thoroughbred is just going to panic. And that's when you never want to be on a horse that's in a panic. I have a few times. I can tell you it's not something you want to experience. As I always tell people, if you're ever on a horse and it starts shaking, that's a horse that's truly afraid instead of a horse that's just kind of learned to spook. If you're ever on a horse that's shaking, that starts to shiver, you know, get off of it immediately, because that's a horse that's about to go out of its mind. And once they do, they won't care what's in the way. I still hear a little bit of improvement. I still like to see the neck getting longer and more swinging than it is doing here. But that's better there. Now it's starting to look a little better. So this horse is certainly having glimpses of really good moments. I just feel like you could influence it a little sooner than you're doing and ask for a little more. But that's starting to look better there. Now just notice how every time the horse stretches its head down, how much better it seems to move behind. That's because that's the position. Now remember, that's what we're doing in dressage, is looking for the position that facilitates the horse being able to swing underneath and therefore bring its back up. They're looking better there. But once again, as I said, the big thing is that you just need to be a little closer to the horse, a little more behind its eye, and actively send the horse on a little bit more. So once in a while, even if the horse trots off, we can't worry about that. You need to be close enough that the horse can feel the whip every now and then. And when I say feel the whip, I don't mean, hitting it as hard as you can with it. I mean, every horse has a different level of sensitivity. Thoroughbred horses tend to be very sensitive, and once you tap them a couple of times with the whip and they understand what it does, and it doesn't take much of a tap, they'll start moving. But look how much better that walk is starting to be there, though. So once in a while we have to touch them, and if they break into a trot, no big deal. All we do is just bring them into a little smaller circle, asking them to walk again until we get the horse back under control. And we start again. And pretty soon the horse will understand that what you want is a bigger walk and not just to go faster. Or that is to change gaits. Now there the horse starts to move out a little bit there. And that was much better. There I see you being a little more active. That's kind of what I want you to do there, a little more like that, but instead of letting the horse go into the trot, keep it in the walk, so you begin to generate a bigger, more swinging walk. Now when we go into the trot here, we can see the horse is pretty much pulling with its shoulders there. So again, you see the underside of the neck. It gets a little better there. It starts to stretch down a little bit. And just like in the walk, we just have to encourage a little more activity. Even if we're not getting a perfect frame for right now, what I would do is get a little closer and just get this horse just a little more active, just so it gets moving. Even if it's not perfectly working over its back, that will lead to that. Same thing here. You can see how the hindquarters are pulled to the inside. The horse still has its shoulders outside the circle. So once again, that tells me you need to work. You need to just be stepping much bigger steps, which of course is good exercise for you, as you said, as you work on bringing your own body back into shape. And that's starting to look a little better. Looking a little better there when it comes around the corner there. Once again, I still feel like here you could be another 3 foot closer to the horse and walking a little more actively. And even keeping the horse on a little bit smaller circle till you get it to soften and move away from you, because that's what you want to do. You want to use the small circle to get the horse to move its hindquarters away from you, though that looks a little better. For some reason it goes better when it comes around this corner over here. But what we have to do is get that, and see how you're not close enough to the horse. So you used your whip there, but you couldn't really touch the horse with it. So that's what I'm saying. You have to get close enough like that there. Now you're starting to get close enough that you can start doing something. And how much more active the horse is and gets into a better stretch when you simply ask for a little more. Much better trot now. Now this is the first time we've seen the horse really start to swing a little bit. Starts to shorten up there. So once again, that's where now you've gotten a little further away from the horse again. So I want you to get a little closer again and keep up the kind of activity that you had a few moments ago. Same thing here. Now the horse is rather hollow there, so we needed to get closer to the horse and send it on a little more. Getting better, more activity there. And notice that as soon as you get the horse active enough, it stretches into the contact. So that should be your takeaway here, is as it comes up, you just need to be quicker at getting the horse to move back out again. So once again, getting her on a little smaller circle and you taking a more active, faster step. And maybe not such a big circle. A little circle might be a little better. Well, that's looking much better there. And just slows down. But that's a really good thing to look at the difference between how the horse was just going. The last half of that circle a moment ago was really quite good. Then it came around to where it was just in front of me here and slowed quite down. And we saw the horse hollow and start to pull with the shoulders again, like it is doing right there. You can even see how the hindquarters just kind of dropped out from behind when the horse did that. That's better there. So it starts to slow right there. And watch again how the hindquarters kind of fall out the back. So keeping a more consistent contact is what we need here, and getting her just a little more active so you stay behind her eye a little more. And I feel she'd stay more consistently because you're getting a good trot once in a while. There she goes. But see once again how the shoulders are pulled outside. So once again we need to be closer to the horse, sending the horse more actively forward. Because we've had some really good moments that the horse has gotten there, and then it has kind of all falls away again. And once again, that's because you're not being consistent enough in sending the horse forward. That is, by working close enough to the horse all the time. So right here, you should be just taking a much bigger, more active step, trying to encourage more activity. That is yourself taking a bigger step. And gets back into a pretty good frame there, and then kind of loses it again. So there you see how you're trying to reach at the whip, but you can't really reach it, the horse, so you can't really affect it very well. It kind of scares it for a second, but that's a horse that just needs to feel a tap once in a while just so she remembers what it is that the whip means. Better there. Now we're getting into a good place. But that's where we need to keep it consistent. And once again, you can see how it hollows. When she hollows, the back end, the hindquarters drop out behind. All of a sudden, the legs are back behind the body again. The neck is shortened. And look how much better it looks when it does get into the stretch. So I feel this horse is ready to do this, but I just think that you're just not asking consistently enough. So that is, once again, just trying to push the hindquarters a little further away from you, staying closer to the horse. As I said, if you're having to, reach out like you were doing there a moment ago with the whip and then kind of snap it, throws you out of balance, but didn't really get a response from the horse because it needed to be touched at that point. But you're certainly on the right track here. I mean, you're having some moments that all the right stuff is happening. So if you keep this up and just try to improve it a little bit, as I said, by getting a little more behind the horse, walking a little more actively yourself. But when I see the horse get correct, which you've had some moments when the horse has really gotten all the way there, when it's really stretched forward and down, and how different the horse looks. Like when you see the horse right now, it almost looks like it's got the brakes on. It's pulling its neck back while yet it's trying to move forward. And watch as it goes down, all of a sudden it seems like there's less impeding the forward motion, because there actually is. The horse, when it's bringing his head up, is basically bracing against its front legs. You can see it kind of put the brakes on there as it starts to pull the neck back away from the direction of movement. So we've got to get to the horse to the point like you have it right there. Now that's what we're looking for. Those couple of moments there were really good before you lost it there for a second. But once again, I think the biggest problem here is just you getting closer to the horse and working with it. That is, staying behind it, taking a bigger step yourself. Not such a big circle, perhaps, a little smaller of the circle, and trying to get the hindquarters out away from you. There, that's better there. But once again, what you're doing here is not bad. I'm just making some points that you could improve a little bit. Once again, you can see how she starts pulling the neck back. You can almost imagine the brakes being applied. You can almost see how the horse starts to brace against his front legs. So once again, a little closer, like right there. Once again, see how the shoulders pulled outside the line of the hindquarters. Pushing the hindquarters over is what you got to do. Now that's much better there. Now that's good. And now you're also working a little closer to the horse, and you're more behind the eye. So you're having some good moments here. Good when it gets to that position. And once again, it's just amazing to see the difference in horses, you know, when you begin to have an eye for what the back end is doing. You know, so much today, as we were just talking about the front legs, it's, you know, I see people training piaffe by hitting the front legs, all these kind of things. It's all starting backwards. We must start from the back end and work forward. Get that free flowing sense in the stride before we worry about anything like that. Like when she gets to there, nothing seems like it's impeding the motion and it's starting to flow and get into a rhythm, and that's what we're looking for. So the horse can never get in a rhythm if it's hollow. It can never be in rhythm because if a horse is hollow, its front and back legs are always out of sync. So while it may look very fast and kind of quick, when we speak of rhythm, we're talking about combining the front and back end, the rhythm between the two ends, not just this sort of nervous rhythm that we see in horses that have been roll-curred and this kind of thing, you know, where they're helt against the bridle. They have this kind of quickness to them that kind of fools people who don't know what they're looking at. They're looking at the knees lifting instead of the hind legs coming through. In dressage, it's all about the hind legs coming through. It's not how high the horse lifts its knees. How high it lifts its knees is nothing more than just, you know, how the horse is built conformationally. So great job here. This has been Will Faerber from Arch Ride with Erin with her new horse Rumour, who's a 4-year-old off the track. But I think you're certainly on the right track here with the horse. Everything is going well. Just those few corrections that I made of just working closer, trying to push the hindquarters out.